Hi, I am so excited to share with you my campaign platform on climate change and sustainability. This is a critical issue with enormous opportunities for Evanston. As a matter of fact, I hope you'll go to danielbiss.com/climate to see the full list of policies and proposals because there's a lot there, but there's also a lot we can talk about today because listen, sustainability and resource management are literally among the oldest challenges that human beings have come together to address, whether that's through water management or the development of agriculture. This is kind of almost what society is here for. And today, climate change is literally maybe the most severe problem in human history. We have to approach it with that kind of urgency, and we have to approach it with that kind of universality. We all have to come together to take it on, and that means we have to be inclusive of all voices, and we have to center racial equity so that we don't try to balance this problem on the back of the very people who have been the victims of so many other mistakes our society has made. Finally, we have to do it with a sense of, yes, mutual shared responsibility, but also the understanding that if we get this right, there is an enormous mutual benefit that we will all enjoy together. So with that, let's talk about some policies. Let's start with the Climate Action and Resilience Plan, or CARP, as it's often called. In 2018, Evanston created CARP, and this is basically an ambitious set of climate goals. So, things like carbon-free electricity by 2030 and lots of other ambitious goals like this. And we are rightly proud of this. It's a strong plan. But, writing a goal on a piece of paper is on some level the easy part. And the hard part is going to come when we actually figure out all the different policy changes needed to enact it. And understand, that question of what is it going to take to achieve those CARP goals is going to be seen throughout our conversation today and should be expressed in all of the different environmental policies that Evanston enacts. But to start here, we need to make sure we are prioritizing CARP across our city government. That means that every single person on staff needs to be thinking about it. Whenever we purchase a new piece of equipment or set up a new city program, we need to be asking ourselves, is this consistent with the CARP goals? We need to make sure that the city budget we pass every year, crucially, is consistent with implementation of the CARP goals. And we can't just rely on city government itself. We have to come together as a community and jointly develop a plan that's going to work for us to implement CARP. And that means centering the question of racial justice and centering communities of color, because communities of color are already experiencing the harshest consequences of climate change, which is just another example of an environmental injustice that we have to reverse. If we come together jointly, we will be able to tackle this problem in a way that is just and in a way that works. I want to talk a little bit more about environmental justice because this is not only about communities of color experiencing climate change today. This has gone on for a long time. There are enormous disparities between primarily black and brown neighborhoods and primarily white neighborhoods in terms of who has had access to safe drinking water, safe air to breathe, and more. In fact, here in Evanston, there's a waste transfer station in the 5th Ward that has exposed black and brown communities to significant environmental consequences that have been mostly absent in primarily white neighborhoods. And so we need to center our environmental efforts around these justice questions. I'm really glad that the city of Evanston passed an environmental justice resolution just a few months ago. That's a great start, and it's naming an important priority for our community, but now we have to implement it. First of all, that means creating a true mechanism of public engagement that will center the voices of the most affected. Next, the resolution calls for us to define environmental justice areas. That will require our city to officially name and put on a map the regions where environmental degradation has caused disparate impact. And once we do that, we need to put together a strong plan to actually solve the problem. And it shouldn't be a narrow plan. It should be a broad, comprehensive mitigation plan that includes where we invest in our infrastructure, how we do economic development. We need to understand that these environmental problems have far-reaching impacts, and therefore we need to devise far-reaching solutions. Next, I want to talk about transportation and mobility. I cannot overstate the extent to which transportation affects all other aspects of life. It's about personal liberty and freedom of movement. It's about public health and strong neighborhoods. It's also about economic justice because guess what? You can't hold down a job that you can't get to. And of course, it's about carbon emissions and climate change. And so we need a bold transportation vision. I support becoming a 15-minute city. This is an idea that says that everyone ought to be able to get to the essentials whether that's a neighborhood school or a store where you can buy healthy food, within a 15-minute walk or bike ride. And if you do that, we reorganize our way of living around neighborhoods. It'll strengthen neighborhood bonds and do a tremendous amount of good to decrease the amount of carbon that we're putting into the atmosphere. So how are we going to do it? First of all, we have to leverage existing upcoming capital investments. These are planned investments, places like Chicago and Church and Oakton. And we have to design them in a way that's maximizing walkability, maximizing bike safety and convenience, and maximizing transit access. Next, we have to address our sidewalks. And we have to acknowledge the fact that our sidewalks are in a worse state of repair in predominantly black and brown neighborhoods in Evanston, and make sure that we're designing our sidewalks for safe walkability everywhere in town. Next, we have to continue expanding bike lanes and bike safety to form complete cycling networks across our whole city. And finally, we do have to remember that vehicles are needed, and we have to move toward electrification of bus fleets, whether that's school buses or CTA or PACE buses. And the city itself needs to have public electric vehicle charging infrastructure to make sure we're encouraging residents to utilize electric vehicles. Next issue, protecting Lake Michigan and access to clean water. And let us start here. Access to safe, clean drinking water is a fundamental human right for everybody. And even beyond that, here in Evanston, with miles of lakefront, we have a special treasure, and that brings with it a very special responsibility to be good stewards. So what do we have to do? Number one, it's time for us to establish a clear public policy that lake access is public, it's universal, it is for everybody, and we maintain it for everybody. Next, we have to address the issue of combined sewer overflow into the lake. What that means is this: our sewage system and our rain or stormwater systems use the same pipes. And so when we have these massive rain events that are more and more common because of climate change, they cause backup and sewage winds up in the lake. We've got to put a stop to that by using much more green infrastructure so there's much less impermeable pavement in Evanston. Next, we have to move away from the utilization of lead lines to get people their water, and we have to immediately institute a true citywide mechanism of testing for lead poisoning, reversing a decades-old vicious inequity. Next, we have to establish a policy to make sure that nobody is without access to water or has their water shut off because of an inability to pay. And finally, we need to use ecologically sound green techniques to deal with the question of lakefront erosion. And that can involve plants, it can involve trees, it can involve green infrastructure, but it's got to be science-based and sustainable. Next item, we have to eliminate carbon emissions from buildings. Buildings contribute a significant portion of U.S. greenhouse gas emissions, and if you think about it, it makes sense. Just imagine the heating and cooling alone. And because buildings are around for a long time, it's really important to get our arms around this now and to do it both for new construction and buildings that are already here, since of course they'll be with us for a long time, we hope. Okay, so what do we have to do? Number one, we have to move toward a net zero building code. This is a difficult thing to do, but it's a thing that other communities have done and that we must do. Next, we have to gradually eliminate carbon emissions from existing buildings, and that's going to be a multi-pronged approach. It's going to require incentives, it will require mandates, and it'll require doing it in such a way that does not ask the communities that have borne the brunt of environmental injustice to also pay for the majority of the costs. We have to do it justly. Next, check this out. There are 16 buildings in Evanston that contribute 35% of our emissions. That's incredible, but it's also an opportunity. We have to work very closely with those 16 institutions, put in place clear, workable, transparent plans for them to completely decarbonize by 2050. And finally, the state has created and ComEd administers programs that enable residents to take advantage of energy efficiency opportunities and renewable opportunities and all kinds of simple things around the house to decrease our own emissions. We have to do a better job of taking advantage of those programs. And guess what? I believe the state's going to pass an expansion of those programs in what's called the Clean Energy Jobs Act, hopefully in the next few months. We have to be ready to expand on our end to take advantage of that opportunity. Next, we need a comprehensive waste reduction strategy. And of course, this is partially about reuse and resource stewardship, but it's also about climate. Why? First of all, reusing materials avoids carbon-intensive manufacturing processes, right? If you don't have to build another one, you don't have to use all the carbon it would take to build another one. It also avoids carbon-intensive transportation to get the new material to where you need it. Additionally, organic materials in landfills can decompose into greenhouse gases, and that is a serious cause of emissions. So what do? First of all, we have a great institution here called the Evanston Rebuilding Warehouse that does deconstruction rather than demolition of buildings, and we should use big municipal projects as a model of how to do that can change behavior across our community. We need to pass a strong construction and demolition ordinance, and by the way, Portland already has one on the books. We can model it after that. People are often surprised to learn that here in Evanston, even though we are a progressive community, our recycling rate is not so great. We need to increase our recycling rate by doing more public education and making it easier and more convenient to recycle. Finally, we need to rethink the way that we do food waste. If you look at Paris, for example, they've completely transformed this by connecting restaurants and grocery stores to nonprofits and simultaneously reducing waste and feeding more people. And we should do the same with composting, emulating San Francisco. If we make composting easy and eventually mandatory, we can transform the amount of organic waste that Evanstonians are sending to landfills. So that's it. And I know it's a long list, and I know it can seem daunting. And I also know that it's easy to say, we're a small community, there's only so much we can do on this problem, so let's focus on other things. But understand this, failure is thinking this is someone else's problem. Climate is everyone's problem, and therefore it is our problem. And in fact, it is because that there's only so much that we can do as a small community that we have a responsibility to do it all. Also, I know that these things won't be painless. They won't be easy. They do involve trade-offs. But listen, the cost of inaction is far worse. We have an opportunity right now to come together as a community and design solutions that work for us, are consistent with our values, and that lead the nation forward. That is an exciting opportunity, and we should grab hold of it. And guess what? We are Evanston. We can do it.